She poured me a drink, then locked the door. And that's when everything changed. The rain had already soaked through my hoodie by the time I made it to their porch. I wasn't supposed to stay long. Just drop off the charger I'd borrowed from my friend and head home. It was one of those soft, steady rains that painted the streetlights gold and made everything feel quieter than it should. I rang the bell, expecting my friend to open the door. Instead, it was her, Sophia, her mom's friend. She stood in the doorway wearing a loose cream sweater and her hair pulled back in a way that somehow made her look effortlessly elegant. She didn't seem surprised to see me. If anything, there was this calm steadiness in her expression, the kind of look that made you feel seen, even before you said a word. "Come in," she said softly, stepping aside. "You're soaked." I should have said no. I should have just handed over the charger and walked back out into the rain. But the warmth spilling out of the house wrapped around me like a soft blanket, and before I realized it, I'd stepped inside. The door clicked shut behind me, and the world outside disappeared. The living room smelled faintly of orange peel and something floral, maybe her perfume. A lamp glowed on the corner table, casting a warm, amber light that made the room feel like a safe pocket of the world. She moved toward the small bar cart by the window with a kind of unhurried grace, picking up 2 glasses. "Sit down," she said. "You're not leaving like this." I laughed awkwardly, still standing near the door. "I'm really okay. I was just dropping something off." Her eyes flicked up to mine, and for a moment, I felt my excuses crumble under the weight of her calm. She tilted her head slightly, not in a demanding way, but with that quiet confidence of someone who's used to being listened to. "Just one drink," she said, pouring something amber and smooth into the glass. "Then you can go." There was something disarming about her tone, not flirtatious, not forced, just warm, real. She handed me the glass, and as our fingers brushed, a small pulse of awareness ran through me. It wasn't loud or obvious, just enough to make me notice how close she was. I finally sat down on the edge of the couch. The rain outside filled the silence like a gentle soundtrack. She sat across from me, crossing one leg over the other, leaning back just enough to look comfortable, but also deliberate. Her gaze wasn't searching for anything. It simply rested on me, as if she had all the time in the world. I took a slow sip, trying to ignore the way my heartbeat was suddenly louder than the rain. I'd known Sophia for years, but tonight, the room felt different. She felt different. Or maybe I was just seeing her for the first time. And in that quiet, golden-lit living room, with the sound of rain pressing against the windows, I had the distinct, unsettling sense that I wasn't just waiting out the weather. Something, I didn't know what yet, had begun. The conversation hadn't really started yet, but the silence between us wasn't uncomfortable. It was the kind that made you notice everything else. The soft patter of rain against the window, the low hum of the heater, the faint creak of the old floor beneath her bare feet. Sophia moved around the living room like she knew exactly where every sound belonged. She wasn't hurrying. She wasn't trying to fill the silence with small talk. She was just there, steady, in control of her space. She walked over to the front door. I thought she was going to check the weather or glance outside. Instead, there was a quiet, clean click, the sound of the lock sliding into place. It shouldn't have meant anything. Probably didn't. But somehow it did. Something about that sound felt louder than it was. My head lifted slightly, as if instinctively trying to read her expression. She didn't offer an explanation right away, and for a second my pulse stuttered just a little. Then, with a small shrug and a half-smile, she said, "I always lock it when it rains. The wind pushes it open." Her voice was light, almost casual. But there was something about the way she said it, the calmness, the quiet authority, that made the space between us feel contained. She turned back to me, and for the first time, I really noticed how she looked standing there in that warm, amber light. The loose sweater fell softly against her shape, and her hair, a few strands coming loose, framed her face in a way that felt effortless. Her eyes held mine with a steadiness that didn't demand but didn't let me look away either. I set my glass down on the table, more aware of the sound than I should have been. The room felt warmer now. Maybe it was the drink, maybe it was her, Maybe it was the way the locked door seemed to press the rest of the world out. She walked back toward me. Slow, unhurried steps that barely made a sound on the hardwood floor. She sat down on the armchair across from me, tucking one leg under herself. Not too close, not too far. Just close enough to blur the usual distance people keep when they don't quite know each other. She tilted her head slightly, studying me the way people study something they didn't expect to interest them. "You're quiet," she said softly. I exhaled a breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "Yeah, just wasn't planning to be here, that's all." Her smile was small but real. Neither was I. The weight of the rain seemed heavier against the window now. The world outside had dissolved into a blur of silver and shadow. Inside, it was warm and still, like the house itself had chosen not to let anything in. She reached for her glass, fingers wrapping around the rim in that unhurried way of hers. There was nothing overt about it, nothing that screamed flirtation. But the way her eyes met mine, steady, unflinching, made everything else fade to the edges. I realized then, it wasn't the locked door that had changed the room. It was the way she carried it. The way she made silence feel like something alive. And for the first time that night, I wasn't thinking about the rain. I was thinking about her. I didn't notice when the tension started to feel less like pressure and more like a current pulling us closer. Maybe it was the soft glow from the lamp. Maybe it was the rain, still whispering against the glass. But the silence wasn't heavy anymore. It felt intentional, like we were both listening to the same quiet thing between us. Sophia shifted slightly in her armchair, uncrossing her legs and leaning forward. It wasn't a big movement, but it changed the air between us. She wasn't at a distance anymore. She was in the same moment as me. "So," she said, swirling what was left in her glass. "You've known them for how long now?" Her tone was light, curious, not prying. 2 years, I answered. "College friends. We kind of found each other at the right time." She nodded slowly, like she understood more than I'd said. "That's a good age to find the people who feel like a second home. It doesn't happen as easily later on." There was a quiet weight in her voice, but not sadness. More like someone who's lived through enough nights like this to know what they mean. She looked down at her glass for a second, and I caught the soft crease at the corner of her mouth, the kind that comes from both laughter and experience. I leaned back against the couch, finally settling into the warmth of the room. "You say that like you've seen it happen a few times." She smiled, small, almost private. "Oh, I have. People drift. Life changes. You start to hold on to quiet nights more than noisy ones." I don't know why, but something in the way she said it made me want to listen. Not just to her words, but to everything underneath them. She wasn't talking about the weather. She was talking about herself. Her voice was low, unhurried. She talked about her work, about how she used to travel a lot in her 30s and how, lately, she's been learning to like the silence of being home. There was a vulnerability there, quiet, not performed. The kind that doesn't ask for pity. And somewhere between her stories and my quiet nods, the room grew smaller. Not physically, but in the way that happens when two people forget the distance between them. When I spoke, it surprised me how honest my own voice sounded. "I don't know what it is, but you talk like someone who doesn't need to prove anything anymore." She looked at me then, really looked. Her eyes, warm brown, steady, met mine with a stillness that almost felt physical. "Maybe," she said softly, "or maybe I just got tired of pretending I do." For a moment, neither of us said anything. The rain filled the spaces our words left behind. She leaned back, her posture loosening, like she wasn't just talking to her friend's son's friend anymore. And I wasn't sitting across from a woman I barely knew. It was two people, caught in the quiet rhythm of an unexpected conversation. Her laugh broke the silence. Low, throaty, the kind that felt earned, not performed. I didn't realize I'd been smiling until I caught my reflection in the window. There was no flirting in that moment. No grand gestures, just honesty. And somehow that was louder than anything else could have been. The rain hadn't stopped. It had just softened, turning into a steady, whispering rhythm against the glass. The house felt sealed from the world outside. A pocket of warmth, where time slowed down just enough to let every detail settle. Our conversation drifted into softer, smaller pieces. Little stories, half-formed thoughts, laughter that didn't need to be loud. And then, without any clear boundary, the words simply faded. But the silence didn't feel empty, felt alive. Sophia leaned back into her chair, her hands resting loosely around her glass. Her gaze wasn't sharp or probing. It was steady, quiet, and warm. She tilted her head just slightly, studying me like she was memorizing the way I existed in that moment. I felt it, the weight of her attention. It wasn't heavy, but it was impossible to ignore. It made the space between us feel smaller, closer, denser somehow. I shifted a little on the couch, not out of discomfort, but because my body was hyper-aware of everything. The warmth of the drink in my hand, the soft brush of fabric against my skin, the faint floral trace of her perfume threading through the air. Felt like the room itself was holding its breath. She set her glass down with a quiet, deliberate sound. Then she leaned forward, elbows on her knees, chin tilted slightly up. The movement wasn't overtly flirtatious. It was subtle, but it pulled me toward her like a current. "You ever notice," she said softly, "how some nights feel louder when no one's talking?" I nodded slowly. "Yeah, like the silence says everything for you." She smiled, not wide, but the kind of smile that carries something behind it. Her eyes lingered on mine a second too long. Then another. There was no script here, no plan, just that suspended air between us, charged with something neither of us had dared to name. Her fingers brushed a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the movement slow, graceful. I watched, not meaning to, not trying to, and she noticed. She didn't look away. She didn't pretend she hadn't caught me watching. She simply held my gaze, as if to say, "I see you, and I don't mind." The sound of the rain filled every small space between our breaths. My heart thudded a little louder, not from fear, but from the quiet realization that something invisible had shifted between us. Her voice dropped lower, softer. "You're thinking too much." I let out a quiet laugh, breathy and a little shaky. "Yeah, I do that a lot." "You don't have to hear," she said, and she leaned back again, like she just placed a weightless truth on the table and walked away from it. I hadn't moved any closer. Neither had she. But it didn't matter. We were already closer. The kind of closeness that isn't measured in inches. It's measured in silence, in breathing, in the steady hum beneath the surface of words. For the first time that night, I wasn't overanalyzing her age or the situation, or the thousand reasons this should have felt complicated. Didn't. It just felt real. And in that charged, delicate stillness, the line between her and me blurred. Not with touch, but with something quieter. Something more dangerous. The silence had settled between us like a second skin. It wasn't awkward anymore, it was charged. Every movement, every glance carried weight. Sophia was sitting across from me, the lamplight falling softly across her face. A few strands of hair had come loose from the bun at the back of her head, framing her features in an unguarded way. She wasn't performing. She wasn't trying. She just was. And somehow that was the most disarming part of it. I shifted on the couch without meaning to, leaning forward slightly. She noticed, of course she did, and mirrored me with a movement so subtle it almost looked like an accident. But it wasn't. It was instinct. Her eyes flicked down to my collar, then back up to my face. "You've got something here," she said softly, nodding toward my neckline. I looked down, fumbling, but before I could react, she was already standing, moving with that same unhurried confidence she'd had all night. Her bare feet didn't make a sound against the hardwood floor. She stopped in front of me, close enough that I could feel the soft warmth radiating from her skin. Then her hand lifted, fingers brushing lightly against the collar of my shirt. It was the simplest gesture in the world. She was just fixing a loose fold of fabric. But her fingers lingered, just a heartbeat longer than necessary. The warmth of her touch spread through me slowly, deliberately, like a ripple that starts small and never really stops. My breath caught. I didn't move, afraid that even the smallest shift would break the moment. She didn't rush. She never did. Her fingertips grazed the edge of my collarbone, feather-light but so precise that my entire body was aware of it. And then she looked at me, not just at my face, at me. Her gaze held mine, steady and calm, as if she was giving me the choice. Step back if you want, or don't. I didn't. The air between us thickened in a way words could never explain. The lamp's warm glow wrapped around her like a halo, and for the first time that night, I realized how close we were. How small the distance had actually been all along. My hands stayed at my sides, but everything inside me leaned toward her. Not out of hunger or impulse, out of something quieter, deeper. The kind of pull that doesn't ask. It just exists. She exhaled slowly, and I could feel her breath warm, soft, against my skin. She smiled faintly, the corners of her mouth curving like she just admitted something without saying it out loud. "You think too much," she whispered again. I almost laughed, because she was right, but my voice didn't work. Only my heartbeat did. She didn't touch me again after that. She just let her hand fall softly away, her fingers brushing my shoulder as she stepped back. The space she left behind wasn't empty, though. It was electric. That one small touch, a collar adjustment, a light graze, had done what hours of talking couldn't. It had crossed the line neither of us had named. And even as she walked back to her chair, the warmth of her touch stayed with me, pulsing quietly against my skin like an unspoken promise. For a long time after that gentle touch, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The air carried too much already. The warmth of her fingertips still pressed softly against my skin. The echo of that look still locked somewhere between us. Sophia returned to her chair, but something in her posture had changed. She wasn't leaning back anymore. She sat with both feet tucked up on the seat, knees slightly turned toward me, as if the invisible wall between us had quietly dissolved. Outside, the rain softened into a misty drizzle. The kind of rain that doesn't rush to be noticed, it just lingers, a little like this moment. She set her glass on the coffee table and folded her hands together loosely in her lap. For the first time that night, she looked unsure, not uncomfortable, just a touch less guarded. "I don't usually," she began, then paused, as though deciding whether to finish the sentence. Her eyes drifted down to her hands. "I don't usually let anyone see me like this." "Like what?" I asked softly. She let out a quiet breath. Not quite a sigh, not quite a laugh. Quiet. Still. A little lonely, maybe. It wasn't a confession meant to gain sympathy. It was the kind that slips out when someone forgets to protect themselves. I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "I don't see lonely," I said. "I just see you." She glanced up then, and for a heartbeat, I saw something shift behind her eyes. Something soft. Something a little scared. "I've spent a long time being the one who holds everything together," she said, voice steady but low. "The one who hosts, helps, listens. But nights like this," she gestured vaguely toward the window, toward the world beyond. "I start to realize how quiet it gets when everyone's gone home." Her honesty didn't feel heavy. Felt real. Real enough that I stopped filtering what I wanted to say. "I've never felt like this around someone older than me," I admitted. My voice sounded quieter than I expected, but steadier. "It scares me a little, how natural it feels." Sophia's eyes softened. There was no mockery in them, no defensiveness. Just quiet recognition. She reached out then, not quickly, not dramatically. Just slowly, as if giving me time to step away if I wanted. Her hand rested gently on my forearm. Warm, steady, human. "I'm not asking you to be anything," she said quietly. "And I'm not promising anything either. I just, like that you're here." That one line wasn't dressed up in grand promises. It was the kind of truth that only comes out in quiet rooms. Her fingers didn't grip. They just rested there. A soft point of connection that said more than either of us could have if we tried to explain what this night had become. I placed my hand over hers, not because I'd planned to, but because it felt like the most natural thing in the world. Her breath hitched, just barely audible. And I realized then that beneath her calm exterior, she wasn't untouched by this. She was just better at hiding it. Two people. One quiet room. No promises. No labels. Just the fragile, undeniable weight of something real unfolding. And as the rain whispered outside, I didn't want to be anywhere else. The rain had nearly stopped by the time I realized how late it had gotten. The house had grown silent, the kind of silence that doesn't demand to be filled. Just the faint hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, the gentle tapping of leftover drops against the windowpane. Sophia hadn't moved much since she placed her hand on mine. Neither had I. It wasn't the kind of moment you rush. It was the kind you hold onto without needing to say why. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft, almost hesitant. You should probably get going soon. I nodded slowly. We both knew she wasn't wrong. But the way she said it wasn't a dismissal. It was something quieter, like she was telling herself the same thing. I stood reluctantly and she followed. She didn't turn on the bright lights, just left the warm, dim glow of the lamp by the couch. It made everything feel softer, smaller, more intimate. She walked with me to the door, barefoot, the hem of her loose sweater swaying just above her thighs. When she reached for the doorknob, she paused. Her hand lingered there, not because she didn't want me to leave, but because she didn't quite want the night to end like any other either. I broke the silence first. Thank you for everything. She tilted her head slightly, a small smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. You make it sound like I did something extraordinary. You kind of did, I said. That made her look down for a moment, like she wasn't used to someone saying that to her and meaning it. When she looked back up, her eyes had softened again. That same quiet vulnerability from earlier, unguarded now. She stepped closer. Not into an embrace. Not into a kiss. Just close enough for me to feel the warmth of her. Close enough that, if either of us moved even a little, something real might happen. You're too young to say things like that and mean them, she whispered. I smiled, just a little. Then maybe I'm not as young as you think. For a heartbeat, the world stilled. The air between us was loaded. Not heavy, just full. Like a single, suspended note that no one wanted to end. Sophia's fingers brushed against mine. Featherlight. She didn't hold them, didn't pull me back. She just let the touch linger. A soft punctuation to everything we hadn't said. I'll see you around, she said finally. Yeah, I breathed out. You will. She opened the door. The cool night air met the warmth inside, and for a second, I felt caught between both. I stepped out slowly, glancing back once, and there she was, framed by the soft light of her living room, sweater falling loosely around her, hair slightly mussed, eyes carrying that same quiet look I'd never forget. She didn't wave. She didn't close the door right away. She just stood there watching, like we both knew the night wasn't something that could be explained later. It just was. As I walked down the short path to the street, the world felt different. Quieter, sharper, alive in a way it hadn't been before. I shoved my hands into my jacket pockets, replaying the sound of the lock, the whisper of her voice, the weight of her touch. Some nights end. Some nights stay with you. And I already knew this one wasn't going anywhere. If you felt something in this moment, hit like, leave a comment with your favorite line, and subscribe for more slow burn love stories that stay with you long after they end.